I arrived at my son's for Thanksgiving dinner, my hands aching slightly from carrying the heavy, still warm sweet potato pie I had baked for him. It was his favorite, the one with the hand-crimped crust, the recipe my own mother had taught me. I was hopeful. Maybe today would be different. Maybe today, on a family holiday, we could feel like a family again, even for a few hours. My daughter-in-law Monique blocked the door. She didn't open it fully, just enough to fill the gap with her body, a human barrier. She was already in her hostess outfit, a sleek, cold-looking silk dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. Her face, which I had only ever seen in a mask of polite, condescending sweetness, was hard and flat with a cold, controlled fury. "We're all sitting," she said, her voice a chip of ice. "There's no room for you." I tried to smile, to reason with her, the pie carrier feeling suddenly heavier, more pathetic in my hands. "Monique, honey, it's Thanksgiving. I'm just here to see Kevin and the grandkids. I can sit anywhere. I can help serve the food. I don't mind." "No," she said, her eyes flicking past me for a moment, as if checking to see if any of her important guests were watching this sordid little confrontation on the porch. "We're full. We just don't have the space." She went inside for a moment, leaving me on the cold windswept porch, the rich savory smell of roasted turkey and expensive catered side dishes wafting out to mock me. She came back, her face even harder, more resolute. She was holding a cheap, flimsy, bright red plastic plate. The kind you buy at a dollar store for a 4th of July barbecue, the kind I knew they kept in a bin for the kids to use when they ate outside. It was piled with scraps. A few dry, pale slivers of turkey gristle, a hard, dry nub of what looked like discarded cornbread stuffing from the edge of the pan, a single congealed, gelatinous spoonful of canned cranberry sauce, the kind with the ridges from the can still visible in its side. "Here," she said. She didn't hand it to me. She opened the front door just enough to lean out, her body still firmly blocking the entryway. And she set the plastic plate on the ground, on the coarse, muddy, bristled doormat right next to a pair of Kevin's dirty, caked mud gardening boots. "If you're that hungry," she said, her voice a final, dismissive whisper, "you can eat there, like a dog." I stared at the plate on the floor. I looked up at her smug, triumphant, beautiful, cruel face. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just laughed. It was a quiet, cold, bone-chilling laugh that surprised even me. It was a sound completely devoid of humor. It wiped the smugness right off her face, replacing it with a flicker of genuine, startled confusion. This was not the reaction she had expected. She had expected tears, begging, a pathetic, defeated retreat. She had not expected laughter. "Oh, honey," I said, my voice suddenly clear and carrying. My years of courtroom transcription paying off, every word perfectly enunciated. "That's where you're wrong." She stared at me, her eyes narrowing. What did you say to me?" "Dogs," I said, taking a deliberate, steadying step back, my eyes locked on hers, my hands perfectly icily calm. "Dogs are loyal. Unlike you." Her face tightened in confusion, then began to twist with anger. "What the hell are you talking about? Are you crazy? Get off my porch." "This," I said. I set my pie down, very gently, very carefully, on the porch railing, a final, wasted gift. Then, I reached into the deep pocket of my coat. I pulled out my simple, unremarkable smartphone. "You see, Monique," I said, as I unlocked the screen, my hands perfectly steady, "I've been a legal secretary for 40 years. My job isn't just typing, it's watching, it's listening, and it's documenting. I document everything. Every single word of other people's betrayals. And honey, your betrayal, it's a masterpiece. I've got all the receipts, the photos, the texts, the flight itineraries." Her face, her beautiful, arrogant, cruel face, finally dissolved. The color drained away, leaving a pale, waxy, terrified mask. What are you talking about?" "This," I said, opening a very specific encrypted folder on my phone, a folder I had labeled, with a cold, precise and righteous fury, "Thanksgiving." I tapped the first file. "Let me tell you how I, a 67-year-old retired legal secretary, got the photos that would end your life. First, let me tell you who I really am. Because my son Kevin and his wife Monique have absolutely no idea. To them I'm Esther S.E. Wallace. Mom, the widow, the retired legal secretary from the county courthouse. A woman whose entire life was lived in the beige fluorescent-lit carpeted offices of the civil court. a quiet, almost invisible fixture typing up other people's dramas, documenting other people's sins, neatly filing away the evidence of human frailty. They see me, and they see simple. They see my modest, paid-off bungalow, in a decent but unremarkable neighborhood. They see my 10-year-old Toyota Camry. They see my sensible shoes and my cardigans from the department store. They see a life lived carefully, modestly on a fixed government pension. I am, in their glittering high-turnover world, sweet, old-fashioned, and utterly hopelessly poor. My late husband, Frank, was a postman, a good, steady, honest man who could make anything grow in our small backyard garden. He left me with that paid-off bungalow, a son we both adored, and a heart full of good, quiet memories, but not a lot of cash. This is the narrative they know. This is the narrative they cling to, because it props up their own. I am a woman who has spent 40 years transcribing the ugliest parts of the human heart. I typed up the depositions for thousands of bitter divorces, the meticulous evidence logs for complex fraud cases, the heartbroken rambling testimonies of betrayed partners who, like me, never saw it coming. I learned to listen, not just to the words but to the silences, the hesitations. I learned to watch, to see the flicker in an eye, the nervous tap of a finger, the subtle lie hidden behind a confident smile. And I learned that the people who talk the loudest about image and success and brand are almost always the ones with the most to hide, the most to lose. I am not rich, not in the way they understand wealth. I don't own a G-Wagon. I don't have a Rolex. But I am not poor. I am an observer. I am a documenter. I am a woman who has seen and recorded the downfall of powerful, arrogant people 1,000 times over. And I am, as my late Frank used to say with a chuckle, the last person on this earth you should ever try to lie to. They never should have let me into their house. Living a life steeped in the legal world, even as a secretary or a court stenographer, changes you. It makes you a student of human nature, but not the kind, hopeful kind. It makes you a cynical, pragmatic student of human failure. I saw ambitious men just like Monique's boss, Damian Marshall, chew through partners, employees, and wives, leaving a trail of broken contracts, broken promises, and broken hearts. I saw insecure, ambitious women just like Monique, attach themselves to that raw power, thriving on the drama, the money, and the reflected glory, convinced their own brilliance made them immune to the consequences. And I saw good, decent, but fundamentally weak men just like my son Kevin, get blinded by the glamour, by the charisma, by the sheer overwhelming force of a personality like Monique's. Men who would make excuses, bend their own morals, and even betray their own families, just to keep the peace, just to stay in the warm, flattering light of that power. My life, by contrast, was built on the bedrock of routine, stability, and verifiable facts. Frank and I saved a small portion of every single paycheck without fail for 40 years. We built a small, comfortable, but surprisingly robust nest egg. We lived in a neighborhood where people knew each other's names, where you helped your neighbor shovel their walk, where your worth was measured by your character, not your car. When Frank passed 2 years ago, the silence in that bungalow, the house where we had raised Kevin, was deafening. It was a physical, crushing weight. Kevin, by then already thoroughly ensnared in Monique's web, became insistent. It was, I see now, her insistence spoken through his mouth. "Mom, you can't be rattling around in that big old house all by yourself," he'd said, his voice laced with that performative, slightly strained concern I was beginning to recognize. "It's not safe. The neighborhood is changing." It was changing. It was rapidly, aggressively gentrifying. Our simple bungalow, due to its location, was suddenly a hot property. Monique, the communications VP with a nose for branding, likely knew its rising value to the penny. "Just sell it," Kevin had urged. A little too quickly. "Sell it, pocket the cash, and move in with us. We've got that huge guest room downstairs. You can help with the grandkids. It'll be perfect. It's the smart thing to do." Against my better judgment, against the quiet voice in my head that screamed trap, I did it. The loneliness was a powerful motivator. The thought of being near my grandchildren, of feeling useful again, was a potent lure. I sold the only home I'd ever known, the repository of my entire married life, and put the substantial 6-figure proceeds into a secure, locked trust account, a critical detail I conveniently and deliberately kept to myself. I moved into their cold, cavernous, minimalist McMansion with a single suitcase and a heart full of a desperate, foolish hope. I was ready to be grandma. I didn't realize I was reporting for my new unpaid full-time position as domestic staff. My son, Kevin, is not a bad person, not at his core. I have to believe that. The little boy who cried when he accidentally stepped on a snail. The teenager who mowed our elderly neighbor's lawn for free. He's still in there, somewhere. But he is weak. Fundamentally, fatally weak. He is insecure, desperate for approval. And completely, utterly, hopelessly bewitched and intimidated by his wife Monique. Monique is the star of their show. She is the VP of communications at a major downtown corporation. She is beautiful, sharp, impeccably dressed. And as she never ever lets anyone in the room forget, the primary breadwinner, her salary, her bonuses, her stock options, they are the sun around which their entire lifestyle orbits. Kevin, with his decent but unremarkable mid-level marketing manager job, is just a planet, caught in her powerful gravitational pull. She treats him less like a partner and more like a high-status, well-loved but ultimately subservient, personal assistant, and he, blinded by his astonishing luck at having landed a woman so far out of his league, by the sheer dazzling high-performance brand of his wife, just takes it. He worships her. He sees her ambition as strength, her arrogance as confidence, her ruthless casual cruelty as just the way she is. "Mom, that's just Monique," he'd whisper to me, his face flushing with embarrassment, after she'd made a particularly cutting public remark about my old-fashioned cooking or my simple, non-designer clothes. "She's a high performer. She's stressed. She operates on a different level than us. You can't take it personally." He became her chief enabler, her official apologist. And in the process he became complicit in her casual, daily, escalating disrespect of me. His adoration for his queen left no room for even the most basic residual loyalty to his mother. He was so terrified of her disapproval, so desperate to remain in her good graces, that he would stand by silent and nodding, his face a mask of pained agreement, as she treated me with a condescension that over time curdled into open contempt. He watched his wife relegate his own mother to the smallest, meanest room in the house, the one over the garage next to the noisy laundry room, while the actual guest suite, the one with the nice view and the private bath, was kept pristine, empty, reserved for important guests. He saw her hand me laminated chore lists. He watched her criticize my cleaning, my cooking, my very presence. He saw her roll her eyes when I tried to tell a story about his childhood. And he said nothing. His silence wasn't just weakness. It was a choice. It was an endorsement. He had chosen his side. He had chosen his queen. And I, the dowager, the relic, was just an inconvenient, embarrassing reminder of the simple world he was so desperate to leave behind. A world his wife was determined to erase. He saw her as a goddess of success. I, with my 40 years of transcribing human fallibility, saw her as a ticking time bomb of narcissism and deceit. The guest room I was given was not, in fact, the guest room. As I'd suspected, that room, the one with the queen bed, the ensuite bath, and the pleasant view of their meticulously landscaped and expensive garden, was kept pristine, empty, reserved for important guests. My room was the small windowless den located off the back hallway, directly over the noisy 3-car garage and sharing a wall with the high-efficiency washer and dryer that seemed to run 24 hours a day. It fit a single cot, a small wobbly dresser, and nothing else. My core in exchange for this luxurious accommodation was to be the full-time on-call nanny, chef, and housekeeper. My days, my retirement, were a relentless, grueling blur of servitude. Up at 6 a.m. before anyone else to unload the dishwasher they'd run the night before, make their complicated, multi-step, individual school lunches. One child was suddenly gluten-free, the other lectin intolerant, diagnoses that seemed to change based on whatever wellness blog Monique was currently obsessed with. Get the children, my grandchildren, 8-year-old twins who had already mastered their mother's talent for the condescending eye roll, dressed and fed. This was a daily battle of wills, negotiating with 2 tiny entitled tyrants who refused to wear anything that wasn't a specific brand name and would only eat one specific type of organic sugar-dusted cereal. Then I'd make breakfast for the adults. Kevin, who was intermittent fasting, just needed a black coffee. Monique, however, required a complex 10-ingredient wellness smoothie that involved kale, spinach, bee pollen, collagen peptides, and a variety of other expensive, foul-smelling powders. Preparing it and cleaning the high-powered blender afterward was a 20-minute ordeal. After they'd swept out of the house to their important lives, my real work began: clean the kitchen to Monique's exacting, almost pathological standards. Do the endless loads of laundry, their delicate hand-wash-only designer clothes kept separate. Of course, pick up the trail of discarded toys, shoes and wrappers the children left in their wake, make the beds, dust the minimalist, hard-to-clean surfaces, walk the dog, erotic, non-shedding designer mutt. By the time I picked the kids up from school, I was already exhausted. Then came the afternoon shift, managing their homework, their tantrums, their endless high-pitched, overlapping demands for screen time and specific brand name snacks. Then start dinner, a healthy home-cooked meal that I would spend an hour preparing, only for Monique to criticize upon her return. "Esther, did you use regular olive oil on the roasted asparagus?" she'd ask, wrinkling her perfect nose, not even looking at me as she scrolled through her phone. "I've told you I only want us using the cold-pressed single-origin avocado oil. It has a much higher smoke point, and it's better for our lipid profiles. Please try to remember that. I'll add it to the grocery list. I expect you to handle tomorrow." Kevin, my son, would just shoot me a look from across the granite island. A look that said, "Just apologize, Mom. Don't make it a thing. She's stressed. She's a high performer." The humiliations were constant, creative and deeply personal. She would forget to include me in their dinner plans on the weekends, leaving me to find whatever scraps I could in the back of their massive, mostly empty Sub-Zero fridge after they'd swept out to an expensive new restaurant. Worse, she started cleaning out her closet and giving me her hand-me-downs. She'd appear at my door holding a designer blouse or a pair of shoes, her face a mask of pitying, benevolent charity. "Esther, this is so last season. I was just going to donate it to Goodwill, but it's still in pretty good condition, and I thought, well, you could probably get some use out of it." She'd hand me the items, which had cost more than my entire monthly pension, as if she were bestowing royal alms on a grateful peasant. And I, trapped needing to keep the peace for Kevin's sake, would murmur my thanks, the bitter metallic taste of humiliation in my mouth. This was the rage bait. It wasn't one single dramatic act. It was the slow, daily, relentless poisoning of my dignity, the constant grinding erosion of my worth. And my son, my only child, just stood by and watched, his silence a sharp, painful daily blade of complicity. He was so terrified of upsetting his queen that he would encourage her to treat his own mother like the dirt beneath her $800 shoes. I am not just a simple old woman. I'm an observer, a documenter. My job for 40 years was to listen to what people said and compare it meticulously to what the evidence showed. And in Monique's case, the evidence, the data points, just didn't add up. Her arrogance, her cruelty towards me, seemed to grow in direct proportion to her success at work. And that success, she claimed, was all thanks to her boss, the CEO, Damien Marshall. Damien was a constant, almost mythic presence in their household. Damien and I closed the big Seattle account. Damien is flying me first class to Chicago for the national conference. Damien says I'm the most valuable, most brilliant VP he's ever had. Damien is counting on me. Her stories were always laced with his name, her voice taking on a breathless, almost reverent quality when she spoke of him. It wasn't just professional respect. It was hero worship. At first I dismissed it. She was ambitious. He was her mentor. Fine. But as the months wore on, my stenographer's instincts, the ones honed by transcribing thousands of depositions in sordid divorce cases, began to prickle. I started to notice the other things. The secret, smiling texts. She would be sitting on the sofa supposedly relaxing with Kevin, but her phone would be angled away from him, a small private smile playing on her lips as she texted furiously. If Kevin asked who it was, she'd snap, "It's work, honey, Damien. He never stops." The urgent work dinners, always on a Friday evening, the ones Kevin was never invited to, the ones from which she'd return late, past midnight, her eyes sparkling, her hair slightly mussed, smelling not of a stuffy restaurant, but of expensive wine and a different masculine cologne that was definitely not Kevin's. The mandatory business trips, almost always over a long weekend, the ones from which she'd return looking not stressed and exhausted from non-stop meetings, but relaxed, glowing, rested, like a woman returning from a vacation, from a romantic tryst. And then, the gifts. The bonuses. These weren't standard corporate procedure, and I knew it. A small, elegant Cartier bracelet appeared on her wrist after the Chicago conference. "Oh, this," she trilled when I noticed it. "Just a little well done from Damien. He gave one to all the senior VPs for hitting our targets. He's just so generous to the whole team. I'm just a simple retired legal secretary, but I know what a corporate bonus looks like. It comes in a paycheck, with taxes deducted. It does not come in a slim red velvet-lined box from Cartier." I started to watch her, I started to listen more closely. I was no longer just the dowdy mother-in-law. I was the silent, invisible observer. And as a woman who has in her career transcribed the lurid, tearful, angry confessions of hundreds of betrayed spouses, I recognized the signs instantly, the classic textbook, almost cliché patterns of infidelity. She wasn't just a bully, she wasn't just arrogant, she was a liar. A blatant, reckless, and incredibly arrogant liar. And she was betraying my son. My weak, adoring, foolish son, betraying him in his own home, while I, his mother, was being treated as the household help. The hypocrisy of it, the sheer brazen sociopathic audacity was staggering. The rage bait wasn't just about the dog plate anymore. It was about this deeper, more profound, more fundamental betrayal. And I, the documenter, the archivist of sins, felt a cold, familiar, professional resolve begin to take root. She was a case, a file to be built. I didn't hire a private investigator. I didn't need to. I didn't have secret millions like some. I had something far more valuable, 40 years of professional experience in observation, documentation, and a deep understanding of human fallibility. And, most importantly, I had access. My adversary was arrogant, careless, and so profoundly dismissive of me that she had made a critical, fatal, amateur mistake. She saw me as the help, and people. I've learned from a lifetime of transcribing legal dramas, get incredibly, unbelievably sloppy around the help. My laminated chore list, the one Monique had so thoughtfully provided, included light tidying and dusting of their pristine glass and chrome home office, a room they both supposedly used but which was clearly her domain. It was my duty to dust the keyboards, wipe the smudges off their oversized monitors, organize the clutter of their busy, high-powered lives. It was here, in this room, in this designated role of the invisible servant, that she left her entire secret life wide open for me to find. One Tuesday afternoon I was in there fulfilling my duties, the scent of lemon polish sharp in the air. Kevin was at work, the kids were at school. Monique, according to the shared family calendar she insisted I monitor, was out at a client's strategy lunch that I knew from her discarded receipts, which I also tidied was actually a spa day at a 5-star hotel downtown. The house was blessedly completely silent. Monique's work laptop, a top-of-the-line, expensive MacBook, was open on her desk, its screen dark but asleep. I moved to wipe it, my dusting cloth brushing lightly, accidentally, against the trackpad. The screen flickered to life, instantly, blindingly, unlocked. She hadn't even bothered to password protect it or set a screensaver lock. Why would she? Who was there to see it? Just me. The simple, harmless, technologically illiterate old woman who supposedly didn't know the difference between a hard drive and a toaster. That's how little she thought of me. That's how little she valued my intelligence, my curiosity, my potential as a threat. Her arrogance was my key. And there, open on her desktop, maximized, was her work iMessage. Synced, of course, to her phone. For efficiency. My heart began to pound. A low, heavy, methodical drum. Thump, thump, thump. I knew I shouldn't. I knew it was a profound, terrible violation of her privacy, even her privacy. But then I thought of the red plastic plate on the doormat. An image that had not yet happened but was the clear destination of this path. I thought of the hand-me-downs. I thought of the constant, quiet, soul-grinding humiliation. And I thought of my son, her husband, my Kevin, whose trust she was betraying, laughing at him behind his back, every single day while I was being treated as his servant. Dogs are loyal, I thought, my resolve hardening into pure cold steel. Unlike you, I'm a stenographer. My fingers are fast, accurate, and discreet. My typing speed even now is over 120 words per minute. I didn't just snoop, I documented. I sat down in her expensive, ergonomic white leather chair. I opened a new blank document, and I began to transcribe. But it was worse and better than just transcribing. Kevin, my son, in a rare fleeting moment of technological kindness and bumbling competence, had apparently tried to be helpful a few months back. He had wanted to sync the family calendar so I, the nanny, could keep track of the kids' endless shifting appointments, piano, soccer, gluten-free playdates. He had used the family's shared iPad, the one the kids used for games, the one I sometimes used to look up recipes. And he had, in his well-intentioned, technically illiterate way, apparently logged into her main Apple ID. Not just the shared family account, to share the calendars. He didn't realize that in trying to share a simple calendar, he had also disastrously for her, synced her entire iMessage history and her entire photo stream to the cloud, accessible by any device logged into that ID, including the family iPad. I didn't even need her laptop, which I quickly closed, wiping my fingerprints from the trackpad. Later that night, in the privacy of my small, garage-adjacent room, the laundry machine rumbling comfortingly on the other side of the wall, I picked up the kid's iPad. I opened the innocent-looking green iMessage icon, and there, in a cascade of blue and gray bubbles, was her entire sordid, secret life. A river of betrayal, dating back years. I sat there, my blood turning to ice, and I began to read, to scroll, to document, and to save. I sat on my narrow, lumpy cot, the only light in the small dark room coming from the glowing screen of the iPad. The hum of the dryer on the other side of the wall provided a mundane, thrumming soundtrack to the destruction of my son's marriage. I scrolled and I read, and I felt the last vestiges of my maternal pity for Monique curdle into something cold, hard, and utterly devoid of sympathy. It was worse, so much worse than I could have ever imagined. This wasn't a new flirtation and midlife crisis, a foolish recent mistake. This was a long-running parallel life. A complete systematic, deeply cynical deception that had been going on for years, long before I had even moved in. The texts between her and Damien's CEO were a novel of treachery. They weren't just flirtatious, they were logistical operational. They were planning their lives, their real lives, around the inconvenient architecture of their marriages and families. Chicago conferences ago, Damien had texted her 3 months ago, a thread I read with chilling clarity. I've booked the penthouse suite at the Peninsula. 2 nights. Make sure you book your own, separate much cheaper room at the convention hotel for appearances. My secretary will handle the expense report for both. Monique's reply. Amazing. Can't wait to get out of this house. Kevin is driving me insane about the new credit card bill. He's so boring with money. He'll be thrilled I'm saving the company money by staying at the cheaper place. My son's financial anxiety, a stress she actively exacerbated with her endless spending, was a joke to them. A piece of cover for their 5-star trysts. Another thread, from 6 months ago just after I'd moved in. My mother-in-law is here. Again, Monique had texted. A string of angry face emojis. She's just sitting in the living room, all the time, reading. It's like having a judgmental, dowdy, silent ghost haunting the place. I can't breathe. It's cramping my style. Damien's reply. Poor baby, that sounds insufferable. Tell your ghost to vanish. Ditch him tonight. Tell him it's an urgent last-minute work dinner. My wife's at a charity thing. My place, 8 p.m. I've got that bottle of Chateau Margaux you liked. The really expensive one. Ditch him. My place. It was so casual, so cruel, so deeply ingrained in their routine. And then I opened the shared with you photo stream from Damien's contact. My hands, my steady stenographer's hands, began to shake. Not with fear, with rage. They weren't just suggestive. They were explicit. Undeniable. The digital, high-resolution, time-stamped proof of her betrayal. There was a selfie of Monique sent from her phone to his, that made my stomach churn with a mixture of disgust and a strange, cold pity. She was in a plush, unfamiliar hotel room, the Peninsula, I presumed. She was wearing a black silk robe that was clearly not hers, open just enough to be deliberately provocative, holding a glass of champagne, her face flushed, her eyes heavy-lidded, a predatory smile on her lips. The caption she'd sent with it, Project Deadline, see you in 5, ready for my performance review. There was a photo he had sent her. A screenshot of a first-class flight confirmation for a business trip to St. Bart's, an island in the Caribbean, not a sales conference in Dallas, as she had breathlessly, stressfully told Kevin. 2 names on the itinerary, Monique Wallace and Damien Marshall. Departure, a long weekend, just 4 months ago, and then, I found it. The one that sealed her fate. The one that made what she was about to do to me on Thanksgiving so much more monstrous, so much more unforgivable. I scrolled back, my fingers numb, back, to last Thanksgiving. A text from Monique sent at 11:30 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning. My mother-in-law is here. She brought a pie, like from scratch. A sweet potato pie. She's so boring. She's just sitting there smiling at everyone, trying to be helpful. She's sucking all the life and energy out of the room. I might actually die of politeness. Save me, please. Damien's reply, just 2 minutes later. My God, that sounds tragic. A true holiday horror story. Ditch the old lady and the boring pie. Come to my place, I'll give you something to really be thankful for. My wife's in Aspen with her family until Sunday. I'm all alone, and I have that bottle you liked. Monique's reply, just 2 minutes after that. On my way, told Kevin I had a work emergency at the office. A server crashed and I'm the only one who can fix it. He bought it, of course. He's a fool. You're a lifesaver. See you in 20. Don't start without me. She had left me. She had left her husband, on Thanksgiving Day, to be with her lover. I sat there in the cold, dark, laundry-scented room, and I photographed everything. I used my own phone, taking crystal clear, high-resolution pictures of the iPad screen, every damning text, every sordid photo, every incriminating flight itinerary, every single word of that Thanksgiving betrayal. I saved them all. I uploaded them from my phone to a new, secure, password-protected, encrypted cloud folder. A folder I labeled, with a cold, precise, and righteous fury, Thanksgiving Evidence. The bomb was built. The evidence was compiled, collated, time-stamped, and ready for presentation. For 3 long, agonizing, soul-crushing months, I lived with that knowledge, that digital poison. It sat in my phone, in my secure cloud folder, a silent, ticking 10-megaton bomb, and I had no idea what to do with it. My every interaction with them, with him, became a grotesque, surreal, agonizing performance. I would sit at the dinner table, in my designated inferior chair, and watch Monique regale Kevin with a hilarious story from her board meeting in Chicago, and I would smile, and I would nod, all while picturing her in that black silk robe, sending that filthy text. I would watch my son Kevin lean over and kiss her, his eyes full of a blind, naive, misplaced adoration, and the hypocrisy of it, the sheer injustice of his ignorance would taste like acid in the back of my throat. He was defending her. He was enabling her. He was sacrificing me, his own mother, on the altar of her happiness, while she was actively, enthusiastically betraying him with the very man she held up as their corporate savior, the source of their blessed life. My first loyalty, my only real, true, foundational loyalty, was to my son. But what, in this impossible, nightmarish situation, was the loyal thing to do? My first primal, maternal instinct was to show him, to sit him down, my poor, blind, loving, foolish son, in my small, cramped room, and shatter his entire world into a million jagged, irreparable pieces. To force him to look at the photos, to read the texts, to see in high-definition, time-stamped, undeniable detail, the woman he worshipped and the pathetic, trusting fool she was making of him. But I couldn't. I just couldn't. I looked at him, at his fragile, carefully constructed ego, at his entire sense of self-worth that was so completely, so pathologically wrapped up in her success, in her approval, in the perfect life she had supposedly given him. Showing him the truth, I feared, wouldn't just destroy his marriage. It would destroy him. He was weak. I knew that. I had perhaps helped make him that way with my own lifetime of protection. This truth, this level of profound betrayal from both his wife and his boss, it might be more than he could bear. He might shatter right along with his illusions. Worse, what if he didn't believe me? What if, in his desperation to preserve his own fantasy, his own sense of self, he chose to believe her inevitable, tearful, manipulative lies over my cold, hard evidence? What if he accused me of fabricating it, of photoshopping it, a term he'd probably learned from her, of being a jealous, vindictive old woman trying to ruin his happiness? What if, as I'd seen in so many depositions, he chose his abuser over his rescuer? The thought of being disbelieved, of being cast out by him as the liar, it was unbearable. So I held it. I said nothing. I sat on this ticking bomb, this digital evidence, and I prayed. I bargained with a God I wasn't even sure I believed in anymore. I prayed she would end it. I prayed he, Damien, would get careless and Kevin would find out on his own. I prayed for any resolution, any divine intervention, any act of fate that did not require me to be the one to light the fuse, to pull the pin, to detonate my own son's life. But nothing changed. In fact, as the weeks ticked by toward this Thanksgiving, Monique's cruelty towards me only got worse. More blatant, more dismissive, more arrogant. My silence, my quiet endurance, my refusal to be baited into the petty fights she clearly craved. She didn't see it as dignity, she saw it as weakness, as surrender, as confirmation of my irrelevance. Her affair, I began to realize, wasn't just a secret, shameful weakness. It was the source of her power, her arrogance, her utter smug, terrifying untouchability. She was getting away with everything. She had her powerful, wealthy, adoring lover, and she had her safe, stable, adoring, compliant husband. She was living two perfect parallel lives, funded and facilitated by the men she was deceiving. And I, the quiet, mousy, all-seeing, all-knowing, judgment-filled mother-in-law, was the only person in her perfect world she could safely, satisfyingly, kick. I was the outlet for all her displaced guilt, her stress, her contempt for the very man she was betraying. My mistreatment became her sport. My dilemma, my moral conflict began to shift, to curdle. This wasn't just about protecting my son from a painful truth anymore. This was about enduring, or not enduring, my own daily escalating psychological abuse. She was humiliating me while betraying him. She was demanding my silence, my servitude, my invisibility as the price for her to continue her secret, sordid life. The moral equation became clearer, colder. Why was I the only one suffering the consequences of her betrayal? Why was my peace, my dignity, my son's honor, less important than her right to cheat, lie and abuse without disruption? I still hesitated. I still hoped. I still loved my son too much to be the one to pull the trigger, to detonate his life just to save my own pride. Until Thanksgiving. Until the morning he knocked on my door and delivered her final unforgivable insult. Until the moment she stood in that doorway, her face a mask of cold contempt, and put that plastic plate of garbage on the floor. Until she told me to eat like a dog. In that one single unforgivable instant, my moral dilemma evaporated. My loyalty to my son's feelings was eclipsed, incinerated, by my loyalty to my own self-worth, my own basic human dignity. She didn't just insult me, she liberated me. She gave me, with her own two arrogant, cruel, perfectly manicured hands, the moral permission I had been lacking. She had, in her spectacular, fatal hubris, finally definitively forced my hand. The morning of Thanksgiving was thick with the tension I had come to recognize. It was the tension of Monique performing perfect family holiday for her important guests. The house buzzed with the unfamiliar sounds and smells of professional caterers transforming her sterile kitchen into a commercial-grade operation. Monique herself was a whirlwind of stressed-out, high-strung energy, vibrating with the need for everything to be perfect. She and Kevin were hosting a large catered dinner, not for family. I was the only family member present, a fact that spoke volumes, but for her world. Her boss, the CEO Damian Marshall, and his oblivious socially prominent wife Diana, were the guests of honor. A few other high-level VPs and their spouses were also invited. It was a power play, a networking event cunningly disguised as a holiday celebration. It was, I knew, critically important for Monique's career, her ambition, her relentless social climbing. I, of course, was the uninvited, inconvenient, embarrassing ghost at this feast of ambition. My presence, my simple nature, my working-class background, clashed violently with the image of sophisticated, effortless power she was so desperate to project for her boss, her lover. I had assumed, based on past performance at their smaller dinner parties, that I would simply be expected to stay in my room, hidden away, quarantined like a carrier of some social disease. A quiet, unspoken, mutually understood arrangement. But Kevin, his face pale and strained, his eyes bloodshot and resolutely refusing to meet mine, knocked on my tiny garage-adjacent room door around 11 a.m. The smell of roasting turkey and expensive, herbed side dishes was already wafting through the house, a rich, savory scent of a celebration I was not to be part of. "Hey, Mom?" he began, his voice a low, guilty, exhausted mumble. He was clearly already stressed, already beaten down by Monique's pre-party demands, already anticipating the conflict to come. "Hey, honey," I said, trying to keep my own voice light, though my heart was heavy, armed as it was with the secret knowledge of his wife's treachery, and now, this impending final humiliation. Look," he stammered, picking at a loose thread on his expensive cashmere sweater, a sweater I now realized I had probably paid for with one of my loans. "Monique she's really stressed about the table setting today. You know, with Damian and Diana Marshall coming, we have a lot of important guests, and everything has to be, absolutely perfect." "I understand, Kevin," I said quietly, already knowing, with a cold, sinking certainty, where this was going. "So," he continued, finally looking at me, his eyes pleading, begging for me to just understand, to not make a fuss, to not make his life any harder than his demanding wife already did. She was thinking, just to make things easier, quieter, smoother, maybe it would be quieter if you just, ate in your room today. He rushed on, the lie tumbling out, desperate, pathetic. "We'll bring you a nice plate. A really nice plate. From the caterers. The good stuff. The first plate. It's just, there's not really any room at the table. It's a very specific formal seating chart. For business. You understand. No room. The two words. The final, unforgivable humiliation. On Thanksgiving Day. To be hidden away in my hovel of a room. My cell like a mad woman in the attic. While my son's wife entertained her lover and her lover's wife in the grand dining room. The hypocrisy, the sheer twisted breathtaking sickness of it was staggering. This was the final straw. This was the line. This was the unforgivable sin. I looked at my son, at his weak pleading pathetic face, and the last flicker of maternal pity, the last shred of my desperate desire to protect him from the truth, died. He was not a victim, he was a collaborator, he was a coward. No, Kevin, I said, my voice no longer gentle, no longer light. It was cold, it was quiet, it was the voice of a legal secretary who has just seen indisputable damning evidence presented in court. It was the voice of a woman who was finally completely done. I will not be eating in my room like a prisoner. He flinched, physically recoiled from the ice in my tone. Mom, please, don't make this a thing. Monique is— I don't care how Monique is, I said, cutting him off, my voice sharp as a shard of glass. It is Thanksgiving, I am your mother. I am coming to dinner. I am bringing my sweet potato pie as I do every year. I will be there at 4 o'clock. You can find me a chair at the table, or I will stand, but I will be there. I didn't wait for his reply. I didn't wait for him to stammer or argue or plead. I just closed the door softly, firmly in his pale, shocked, uncomprehending face. I went to my small packed closet. I took out my best dress, a simple dark green velvet, old but elegant and dignified. I laid it on the cot. I went to my handbag. I took out my phone, checked the battery, full. I opened the Thanksgiving folder. I reviewed the files one last time. The hotel selfie, the flight itinerary, the Thanksgiving text, the Chicago kiss, all present, all correct. I slipped the phone and the small powerful thumb drive I had copied the files onto. A good legal secretary always has backups in triplicate into the deep hidden pocket of the velvet dress. I was done hiding. I was done being a victim. I was done protecting my son from a truth he was actively spinelessly participating in. I was going to dinner, and I was bringing the bomb. I arrived on their doorstep at precisely 4:02 p.m., holding my sweet potato pie, the heavy fragrant dish still warm from my oven. I had used the small neglected oven in their garage, refusing to set foot in Monique's kitchen that day. Felt like an offering, a relic from a different, more innocent, more loving life. The house was already buzzing. The sophisticated sound of adult laughter and the clinking of expensive crystal glasses drifting through the thick, imposing front door. A professional catering truck, large and white and anonymous, was parked discreetly down the street. Its presence a clear sign that my homemade pie was, as Monique had already implied, utterly embarrassingly redundant. I walked up the long limestone pathway, my sensible heels clicking, my head held high. I rang the bell, the cheerful melodic chime, a sound I knew cost them $300, a grotesque counterpoint to the cold, hard, righteous fury in my heart. I heard the party noise quiet down for a moment. The sound of approaching footsteps, sharp, quick, staccato, angry, Monique's heels on the imported Italian marble foyer. The door was yanked open, not wide in welcome but just a few inches. A barrier. Monique stood there, her body physically blocking the opening. She was a vision. A stunning, breathtaking vision of cold, reptilian beauty. She was wearing a backless, blood-red silk dress that must have cost a fortune, her hair swept up in a flawless, intricate knot, diamonds glittering at her ears and throat. She looked like a movie star, a cold, angry, reptilian movie star. Her face when she saw me standing there, my pie in hand, my simple green velvet dress on my back, was not welcoming. It was a mask of cold, controlled, and utter fury. She had clearly not believed I would actually truly dare to defy Kevin's request, her command. I thought Kevin told you not to come, she hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper, her eyes darting nervously back over her shoulder, checking if any of her important, powerful guests were watching this sordid, domestic, working-class drama unfold on her doorstep. Hello, Monique, I said calmly, my voice polite, as if I were greeting a stranger at a church social. Happy Thanksgiving. I'm here to see my son and my grandchildren. As is my tradition, I've brought a pie. I held it up slightly, a useless, pathetic, symbolic peace offering. We don't need your pie, she snapped, her eyes raking over me. over my simple dress, over the pie in its old worn carrier, with undisguised contempt. We have a catered dessert buffet, with macarons, and pâte de crème. We have no room for you. I'm not asking for a throne, Monique, I replied, my voice still dangerously unnervingly calm. I was a stenographer, recording this exchange in my mind, word for hateful damning word. I'll sit on a stool in the kitchen, I'll help the caterers serve, but I am not going to be hidden away in a room by the garage like a shameful secret on Thanksgiving Day. I am your husband's mother. I am a guest in this house. Now please let me pass. I took a small, deliberate step forward, not aggressively but insistently, firmly. Her eyes flashed with a cruelty that was breathtaking, a cruelty born of pure cornered panic. She felt her control slipping, her perfect high-stakes party being threatened by my mere stubborn, undignified presence. She needed to reassert her dominance, quickly, brutally, and definitively. No room, Esther, she spat, her voice dropping to a low, final, chilling command. I mean it. You are not embarrassing me in front of Damien and Diana Marshall. You are not ruining this for me. You are not coming in. I stood there on the porch, the cold November wind whipping at my thin coat, the heavy warm pie in my hands, and I just stared at her. At her beautiful, cruel, triumphant face, I felt a profound, bottomless sadness, not for me, but for her, for my son, for the whole rotten, hollow, heartbreaking charade. Monique, I said, one last time, my voice barely a whisper. Please, don't do this. He's my son. He's my husband. She retorted, her voice a low, vicious snarl. And my boss is in there. My future is in that room. And you, she looked at me, at my pie, at my sensible shoes. You are my past. And you are not welcome. She turned, her red dress swirling like a matador's cape, and disappeared for a brief, terrible moment back into the warmth and light of the foyer. I stood there, frozen, thinking she had perhaps gone to get Kevin, to bring him into this final, ugly, public confrontation, to have him be the one to deliver the final killing blow. She came back a second later, but she wasn't with Kevin. She was holding a cheap, flimsy, bright red plastic plate. The kind they used for the kids' backyard barbecue parties. The kind you buy in a stack of 50 at a dollar store. And on the plate a pathetic, insulting, disgusting collection of scraps. A few dry, pale slivers of turkey gristle, clearly carved from the underside of the bird. A hard, dry, brown nub of what looked like discarded cornbread stuffing from the edge of the pan. A single, congealed, gelatinous spoonful of canned cranberry sauce, the kind with the can ridges still visible in its side. It was, I realized with a sudden sickening jolt, the food from their kids' plates, the half-eaten, discarded scraps, scraped together. Here, she said, her voice dripping with a contempt so profound, so absolute, it was almost theatrical. She didn't hand me the plate. She opened the front door just enough to lean out, her body still blocking the entryway, and she set the red plastic plate on the ground, on the coarse, muddy, bristled doormat, right next to a pair of Kevin's dirty, caked mud gardening boots. If you're that hungry, she said, her voice a final, dismissive, triumphant whisper, you can eat on the porch, like the dog. At least he knows his place. She started to close the door, a small, cold, satisfied smile playing on her perfect, lying lips. That was it. The plate, on the floor, the scraps, like a dog. The years of quiet humiliation, the swallowed insults, the endless, thankless servitude, the casual cruelty, the complicity of my son, the stolen Thanksgiving with her lover, the sheer breathtaking, unforgivable arrogance. It all coalesced in that one horrific, symbolic image. The red plastic plate of garbage on the muddy doormat. The sadness I felt, the hesitation, the moral dilemma about protecting my son, it all evaporated. It burned away, like fog in a nuclear flash, leaving behind only the cold, hard, pristine, righteous certainty of a court stenographer, who has just heard the final, damning, incontrovertible piece of testimony. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I laughed. It was a quiet, cold, bone-chilling laugh that surprised even me. It was a sound completely devoid of humor. It was the sound of a latch clicking open, of a weapon being armed. It stopped Monique in her tracks, her hand freezing on the doorknob. Her smug, triumphant expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine, startled confusion. This was not the reaction she had expected. She had expected tears. She had expected begging. She had expected a pathetic, defeated, shuffling retreat. She had not expected laughter. Oh, Honey, I said, my voice suddenly clear, calm and carrying in the sudden silence of the porch. That's where you're wrong. She stared at me, her eyes narrowing. What? What did you say to me? Dogs, I said, taking a deliberate steadying step back, my eyes locked on hers, my hands perfectly icily calm. Dogs are loyal, unlike you. Her face tightened in confusion, her mind clearly not processing the word. What the hell are you talking about? Are you crazy? Get off my porch. This? I said. I set my pie down, very gently, very carefully on the porch railing. A final wasted gift. Then, I reached into the deep velvet pocket of my dress. I pulled out my simple, unremarkable smartphone. My hands were perfectly steady. You see, Monique, I said, my voice still calm, conversational, as if I were a lawyer patiently explaining the articles of discovery to a very, very slow client. I've been a documenter my whole life. It's just my nature. I notice things. I take notes. I save evidence. I transcribe betrayals. I unlocked the screen. I opened my photo gallery. I tapped the Thanksgiving folder. It opened, revealing the neat, damning grid of thumbnails. For 3 long, agonizing months, I said, I have sat on this, because I love my son, and I didn't want to be the one to destroy his life. I kept hoping you would stop, that you would end it, that you would show one single, solitary shred of basic human decency. Her face was draining of color now. She knew, she didn't know what I had, but she knew in her gut that it was real. But the dog plate, Monique, I said, my voice dropping to an almost regretful whisper. That was a mistake. A fatal miscalculation. That was the final exhibit. That was the piece of evidence that told me you weren't just a liar. You were a monster. And you needed to be stopped. I selected the 5 most damning files. The hotel robe selfie. The first-class flight itinerary to St. Bart's. With her and Damien's names. The screenshot of their filthy mocking Thanksgiving text exchange from last year. The photo of them kissing at the Chicago conference. His hand buried in her hair. Esther, no, she breathed, her voice a desperate gasp, her hand reaching for the doorknob, perhaps to slam it shut to hide. Don't, please, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said. I understand respect. I understand loyalty. And I understand send all. I opened a new text message. My fingers were flying, quick and precise, like a stenographer typing a final verdict. First, the primary target. Kevin. My son. He deserved to know. He needed to see the woman he had sacrificed his mother for. Monique's eyes widened in pure, abject terror. No. She breathed, her voice a desperate, strangled gasp. Esther, no, don't. Please. I'll get you a plate. A real one. You can come in. Please, Esther. Don't do this to me. Too late, Monique. I said, not looking up. The time for respect is over. Now is the time for consequences. Next I scrolled to the contact I had saved from her company's public website, a list I had meticulously memorized. Damien Marshall, CEO. He should be included in his own downfall. Then, HR complaints. An official record was necessary. Then, every single name on the executive team and board of directors contact list. Click, click. Esther, stop. Please, she begged, lunging for the phone. I stepped back easily, out of her reach, holding the phone up. You really shouldn't have put the plate on the floor, Monique. And then, the master stroke. The final, devastating blow. The one I had found just last week, after hours of deep diving into their social media. The public. Very active, very family-oriented Instagram handle for Diana Marshall Life. Damien's unsuspecting, socially prominent, and I knew from the caterer's list I'd accidentally seen, currently present wife, who was at this very moment, inside that house, not 10 feet away, laughing and drinking her lover's wife's champagne. I added her handle to a new Instagram direct message. I typed one single, simple, brutally effective sentence. Happy Thanksgiving. So glad to see all Monique's hard work with her boss Damien is paying off. Here's a look at their last project. Documented for your convenience. I attached the 5 files. Esther, no, don't. I'll do anything, she shrieked, lunging at me again, her nails out like a cornered animal. I hit send. To everyone, all at once. I held the phone up, the screen bright in the gathering dusk, so she could see the little blue bar turning into a delivered checkmark. It's done. Monique's face drained of all remaining color. She stared at my phone, at the delivered receipts, and she let out a wail. A sound I had never heard from a human before. A sound of pure unadulterated existential despair, the sound of a soul being ripped from a body. She lunged for the phone again, a desperate, clumsy, clawing motion. "What did you do, you bitch? What did you do?" But I just stepped back, easily, out of her reach. It was too late. The bomb had landed, the fuses were lit, and the explosions began. From inside the house through the still open front door we heard it. Paused? A man's voice, probably Kevin's, from the living room. "What the hell? Monique?" Bzzt. Bzzt. Two more phones, different notification sounds, from deeper within the party. And then, the loudest sound of all, a woman's phone, nearby. A sharp questioning, "What is this?" And then, the scream. It wasn't Monique's. It was a different scream. A shriek of pure sharp horrified rage. "Damien!" The voice bellowed, a voice I now recognized as belonging to the elegant blonde woman I'd seen schmoozing with Monique earlier. Damien's wife. "Damien! You lying son of a bitch, this is your work emergency, this is your vice president." The party exploded. It wasn't just noise, it was pure unadulterated chaos. I heard shouting, screaming, the sound of a glass breaking. I heard Damien's wife yelling, her voice cracking with fury. I heard other guests shouting in confusion, demanding to know what was going on. And then, I heard Kevin's voice. Not a shout, a low, strangled, agonized, "Oh, my God. Monique?" The sound of a man's entire world, his marriage, his reality shattering in a single devastating instant. Monique. Hearing it all, the scream from her lover's wife, the broken, questioning cry from her husband, knew it was over. Her career, her marriage, her affair, her reputation, her entire, carefully constructed, perfect, glittering life, all of it detonated by a single text message from the simple old woman she had just tried to feed like a dog. She crumpled to her knees on the doormat right next to the plastic plate of scraps. She let out a sound I will never ever forget. A low, hollow, animal wail of utter final ruin. And me? Esther looked down at her, this broken, sobbing, pathetic creature, and I felt nothing. No pity, no remorse, no maternal ache, just the cold, quiet, satisfying click of a file being closed, a case being won, a transcript being finalized. I turned my back on the chaos, on the screaming, on my son as he stumbled out the front door, his face a mask of shattered disbelief, looking at me, then at his wife, then at the phone in his hand. I left my sweet potato pie sitting on the porch railing, a final mocking offering to a feast that would never be eaten. I walked calmly away from the house, my footsteps steady on the stone path. I got in my old sensible car. I started the engine, my hands were perfectly steady on the wheel. As I pulled away from the curb, I saw, in my rearview mirror, the front door of their perfect $1,000,000 house wide open, guests spilling out onto the lawn, pointing, shouting, as the wreckage of their Thanksgiving, their marriage and their entire lives burned to the ground behind them. Justice, I thought, as I turned the corner heading home to my quiet, peaceful bungalow. It's not always served hot. Sometimes, as I know better than anyone, it's served ice cold, with receipts. Documented, transcribed, and delivered.